Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today, we are super excited to have on our podcast Paulie Gavoni, who is the director at PCMA and the managing member at Heart and Science Consulting. We actually met Paulie this year at the ABAI conference. I attended one of his sessions, and I found it was so refreshing because it was on more about managing and leading the staff, which has so many behavioral principles to be used. And he talked about, all the change that can happen when you manage and lead so differently, which is so refreshing from, the typical ABA stuff that we use. And so, we went over, we had a conversation, and I'd love to share more about what you do. So welcome.
Thanks very much for having me on. I love talking shop and disseminating the science of human behavior. Like I think intra dissemination. Like, but even when in our field, I feel that so many folks are kind of stuck in the behavioral matrix and they suffer from what I call behavioral myopia. And that simply means we forget about the science and applying these principles outside of working directly with learners. And I mean, everywhere, all results require behavior. So we need to always keep our behavior lens on. It's so prevalent in the field. I just think that we've been conditioned through our coursework not to only see it being used in one way. And I didn't come from a formal education initially. I came from a university. It was before you had to go get your coursework through university. I trained at Behavior Analysis Inc., which they were amazing, the coursework, but it was two courses. So I almost feel like maybe, and I didn't get supervision, so I almost feel fortunate because I had to figure out stuff on my own in that way. It probably wasn't fortunate for the clients I was supporting and the learners and everything because I was learning on the job. But I was like, well, wait, like this is like in MMA, I train fighters. I'm like, well, this is behavior and we're trying to get results here and we can use the science here. I'm sure everybody's doing it because I was such a slacker, not going to conferences, not reading research. I just assumed that the stuff I was doing, like everybody was doing. And then to come to find out, like nobody was doing, like, what? What? I don't get it. It's the greatest science in the world for make a difference. Why wouldn't you be using this everywhere? So anyways, I feel lucky that way.
Great. So for those of our audience who may not be familiar with you, do you want to just give us a bit of a background about like what you do?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I'm kind of I specialize in organizational behavior management, which is just applied behavior analysis, but it's like from my point of view, if you're working in schools, for example, because that's one of my passions, working in schools, we would view student behavior as a result. It's really if we want to create any sort of lasting change with their behavior, we would need to change the behaviors of the adults in the classroom and outside the classroom. Too often we come in there, we make a great plan, we write it, we give it to the teacher and nobody follows it. It's because there has to be local performance management. We have to build capacity at the school level. Otherwise, we're never getting out from behind the eight ball. We're always putting out fires, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of, I love working in schools at the level, but also in behavior analytic organizations, which again, mind-boggling. Why aren't we applying the science of human behavior there through organizational behavior management? We have a lot of turnover. We have a lot of RBTs being dropped in the position unprepared to meet the demands, and then we're blaming them. We're blaming BCBAs, and essentially, when you start blaming people, you're no longer looking at things through a behavior analytic lens. And I've also trained. I use the science to train fighters. I have local, state, national, and even world champions using the practical application of the science. Like there are behavior analysts that are way more brilliant than I am. I don't even hit the brilliant level. But I am good at helping people just see the practical application, right? So I believe that 80% of, and I have no research to support this, is just my guess, right? My guesstimate, but I believe that 80% of our problems can be solved with 20% of the science. And I say that because when I've gone in to turn around like failing schools with a team of people, right? I'm not going to say that I owned it myself. And also it's the science that did it, not me. But turn around failing schools with 20% of science, very practical stuff that I did that had large impacts on, on student behavior and teacher and staff performance. And I've written all about it, all my stuff, all in all my books and everything. I'm very transparent about what I did. There's no mystery. It's all out there. I want people, please go use it. I'm not trying to hide it and save it. I'm like, go use it. It works. And if you need help using it, well, then holler to me, and I'll be happy to help.
It makes so much sense because as behavior analysts who teach kids with autism or teach kids with other special needs, we always focus in on the kiddo. And it's always, let's get results from the student. And it's got to be because of our SD, or it's got to be because of, we've got to break down this treatment plan more. Maybe we need to do another assessment. Maybe we need to do this. But really,
from an organization standpoint, you've got to step back and take a behavioral lens on the whole association. And I love what you said about how the student results or the student's behavior isn't our B section of the ABC column. It's actually the C section. No, this is the consequence. This is what we need to be looking at as the results and changing our behavior that way. I love that.
Well, that's it. You got it. And I think that's where like breaking people out of the matrix. When I wrote an article a while back about the behavior analyst as the OBM consultant in schools, and I said, I think when they hear the word organization, they get like flustered, like I can't. How am I going to change the whole organization? I'm like, that classroom is very much like an organization where the teacher being like the CEO and the students are very much like employees and they're working together to produce some sort of result, that business result that we call student achievement, and there are processes and routines in there. And so like you can just completely put an organizational behavior management lens on. And the only thing that separates ABA from OBM is that when you start trying to get results through the behavior of others, you are now in the world of OBM, in which that's everything. Like anywhere, unless you're working directly with a learner, that's why everybody needs to understand these concepts. In my consulting work, I have a consulting framework that's assess, involve, train, coach, and evaluate. And assess is like, getting, what's going on? What do you want it to look like? What's it look like and why? And then involving the stakeholders, you have to involve the stakeholders. Too often we just tell them what they need to do, but they have to author. If they author it, they'll own it. We're there to ask the right questions and guide them in the right direction to make sure it's behaviorally sound. And then we have to make sure that people in the training phase, that people have the knowledge and skills to be successful with the components, either training them in the plan itself or the components of the plan. And then what I've learned, and the reason I've written a number of my books, and my recent one, Deliberate Coaching or Positional Authority and Leadership, is that training is an antecedent. Training doesn't solve all our problems, right? It's acquired. It's like peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's intended from a performance management point of view. It's intended to get behavior going, but we know that doesn't keep behavior going. We have to get behavior in touch with consequences, and that's what why coaching functions, right? To support the generalization of learned skills into the natural environment. And we switch from telling people what to do to asking them what are they doing and what impact they're having. And if we've involved them in goal setting and we find out, we've done things like motivational interviewing or what I call grow questions, to finding out what's important to them, what's blocking their access to their goals, and involve them in setting goals and making the plan, then if you've done it right, they're going to want to achieve those outcomes. Now we're there as a supporter. And then, of course, the final piece is the evaluation part, and that is like, are we making the progress? What are the leading indicators? What are the lagging indicators? What metrics are we looking at? Are we also checking with our stakeholders and finding out how it's working for them, how we're working for them, right? Because we are working for them, but we treat it like they're working for us way too often, right? I like servant leadership, servant coaching. We can use all these different terms, right? But they're the consumer and we need to do things for them, which means we have to check in with them regularly. None of this yearly stuff that's like an autopsy that I talked about in my talks, right? We need to do it regularly.
Mhm. Yeah, we have a lot of BCBAs that we coach and we mentor. Who's one of their biggest challenges is I'm not in this classroom full time, but I'm hired to go in and write a behavior plan, and nobody follows it. And so what you're saying is, using these components, but don't just go in and write the behavior plan for the child, but look at it as, talk to the teacher, and the teacher is the manager of her little, enterprise here, which is her classroom,
Yep.
and think about how you can work on changing the teacher's behavior through coaching, through training. And then if you could speak more about that, the measurement piece, because I think it's so valuable to talk about the teacher's rating of your effectiveness, you're not just as effective as the student's data, you're as effective as the teacher thinks you are.
That's the deal, man. You know what I mean? And like if you involving, so we always forget, we talk about the ABC, the three-term contingency, but it's really the four-term contingency. And everybody forgets about the MO. And you got to create a want for people to begin with. And that's why going in and like assessing and evolving and building relationships and finding out what the reinforcers are. And like I'm big. We have a course. I have a course that I developed with Matt Sikoria and Anika Costa called the Behavioral Toolbox. And the first one's called Ready, Set, Consult. It's about all the shit that, excuse my language, but that we screwed up going into classrooms and schools, and like what the stuff I wish I would have known then that I know now. It took me years to like figure it out. Like, am I miserable here? Why am I not producing outcomes? Why am I being blamed for stuff? Why do they think I'm going to come in there and sprinkle behavior dust and all the behavior's going to go away? Why am I responsible for everything? And where I figured it out through an organizational behavior management lens. So there's that course. There's another course that's about just like don't jump right to FBAs. If there's something simple you can do, do that thing. So it's like 5 things you can do rather than doing FBA, which is looking at systems things, the things that are easiest for the teacher to do. Because if that teacher doesn't have basic tier 1 approaches in place, whether it be behavioral, instructional, they're certainly not going to follow behavior plans, asking them to do a whole bunch of things more or less or differently than they're doing right now. So do yourself a favor and do the educator a favor and check those things first. And then we have a course coming out next month called Motivational Interviewing, and I love that. And it is so powerful. Now, in our coursework, we introduce it as grow questions to begin with, but like the actual motivational interviewing, it's pretty deep. I don't know if you have experience with it, but it's powerful. I mean, it's helped people to overcome addiction, and it just makes so much sense. But it really takes skills to do it because, like, let's say you go in, you know what needs to happen. You shouldn't push people to do it. You need to, like, through good questioning, help them see for themselves that they need to engage in some sort of behavior change. And there's a sequence of questions, like open-ended questions and affirmations and reflections and summaries. And, there's different phases that you go through. So it's very, very powerful. I wish we taught more of this in our, you want consent from people and you want assent from people, that's a sales job. And we're not selling used cars, we're selling behavior change. And we want people to engage in behavior change because it's going to produce a valued outcome for them, which means we need to know what their values are up the chain. We learn from the learner that what their preferences are and what their, supposed reinforcers are. But we need the same thing from the other people, from the teacher, from the school leader, from the district leader, right? All this is chained together and we forget about all these other, this performance chaining.
We talk a lot, Sharon and I, in our other jobs, talk a lot about ACT, like acceptance and commitment training. And, people use it, okay, well, you've got a learner who presents like this, let's use it with this learner, or you've got a student who does this. And, we forget, oh yeah, teachers need this too. And it doesn't have to be a formal ACT matrix. I love that idea of questions and the grow questions. I'm going to
focus on the values,
checking out that CEU to focus in on those values. But you're right. Like I've done some ACT values matrix with people and I don't need M&Ms anymore to motivate. I never use them, but like, I don't need that to motivate anybody anymore because when it's coming from internal and you say, hey, remember your core values, or, hey, I'm working with you. You wanted this change versus me pushing this change on you. It makes a massive difference.
I love that so much. And we use, I mean, literally when we do something called values-based assessment, performance engineering, and this, values-based systems analysis, sorry, and performance engineering. The word is too long, but we start with the ACT matrix because we believe, and I've written it very clearly in my book, Positional Authority and Leadership, like your system should be deliberately designed to deliver positive reinforcement for value out of behavior, which means you need to know what your values are, and those need to be unpacked behaviorally because values are like, think about it as like a functional response class. You know what I mean? We need to identify these specific behaviors that are going to produce these valued outcomes. And if you don't do that, like, too often it's like there's just writing on the wall, and those values look great, but there's no evidence of it anywhere. So systems should be built on that. And the system should be like, we have to design the system for like, ideally, what should it look like? And now we can go back and look at that system once we chain it all together and say, well, now what does it look like? Now we have the ideal, that's our standard. We have the current reality. Now we figure out why. Why doesn't this system look like that system? And now what do we need to do to change it? It's so powerful. And man, we have these tools through behavior analysis. It's amazing.
Yeah, you take a big goal and you break it down into smaller goals and you reinforce what needs to be reinforced along the way. It's basically what we do, right?
That's it. That's it.
I have a similar experience where I started working in a school and they just wanted a BCBA to come in and really consult to like, we're struggling with these kids. So like take these kids and like work with them here in this room and then put them back into the classroom and they'll be like kind of all fixed. And very quickly I learned that this is not going to work because you can't change the kid without changing the system.
Mm-hmm.
So over the course of like a few years, I had the flexibility to really change the system and be able to have ABA therapists full time in the classrooms, BCBAs overseeing, teachers trained, like all of these things that really made a huge impact. But as BCBAs, we're often not given this either the flexibility and the freedom or the skill set. We're trained in school on behavior principles, but not really on like the management and leadership parts of what ends up being a lot of what we do. Yep. What is something that you would tell that BCBA who's like going into this management or leadership position on how to transition that successfully?
Well, I mean, you have to listen, there's an expectation of BCBAs when they go in there that they're going to fix student behavior, right? So it falls on their back. And we have to retrain the system what we can do. And a lot of times they do it because they don't know better. because they've come out of coursework and they've, somewhat learned how to do an FBA and BIP, and they've gone there and they did it and they think this is what it takes, but it's not, because we have to look at the behavior of the adults in the areas, right? So all the things that we just talked about, they need to learn how to assess not just that student behavior, but the environment, what's going on, simple things like ecological checklists. They also need to do things like they have to build relationship with the school leaders, right? What are their values and how's it tying in? They have to ask the right questions, because like, listen, if you're going through a school and there's behavior's a mess everywhere, but nobody's been trained in classroom management, there's probably a skill deficit, and so like, if a behavior analyst can ask the right questions and help these folks to see that, you know what, I kind of get why we're having some issues. So it's an EO for wanting to make a change. And now the behavior analyst says, well, what if I was able to help you develop a training or provide the training or help you with the coaching or whatever, I mean, walk you through this process. Now I'm only here every Monday, but here's what I can do for you in the meantime. Or if you want, I can go do the behavior plan, but here's the problem. That behavior plan is going to take me, couple weeks to develop because I'm waiting on data and interviewing people. And I'm only signed to your school 1 day a week. So essentially, like while I'm working on this plan, you're not going to see me. And meanwhile, there's other behaviors popping up everywhere. So the best thing for me to do would be to try to build capacity with your school to solve these problems. So like I believe right before I left the district, we started using something called prevent, teach, and reinforce as the FBA BIP and it's not, listen, it's not as precise as many other approaches, but we don't need that level of precision most of the time. And it involves the stakeholders. It walks people through step by step. It's so practical. And I found very quickly, which I always kind of knew, but when I saw it happening, as they authored the plan themselves, they owned it far more. Right. So when I wasn't there, they're still doing it. The AP was at the table, the principal's at the table, we're the instructional coach, the teacher, and there were the people that I would say, like, okay, listen, who's going to follow up with this during the day, right? Because somebody's got to check in with the teacher and give them, reinforce them for doing it. And, really the teacher might initially do it just because people are showing up. That's okay. We want them to behave well enough and long enough till they produce a valued outcome. In this case, behavior is getting better. Everybody values that. So, we really have to involve the stakeholders. So, the people going in there, they really need to know the practical application of organizational behavior management.
And I think really, like you're saying, being able to think bigger, like think bigger than a behavior plan and be able to think creatively about how to build capacity, because they need to have ownership over these processes as opposed to looking to someone outside of themselves to always have those answers. And I think that's so important.
I mean, it really is. And when I figured it out, finally, I'm like, it felt like such a relief because I can't own all this, right?
Yeah.
This is a team approach, and this is how I can serve the team best. And I had a responsibility. It's not like just dumping the responsibility. I have a responsibility to do certain things, but everybody knew what they were supposed to do, and it's very clear. And when you have that, gosh, you start making some real change. And the main thing is, it's like a coach the coach model. I am here to build capacity at your school. I want to teach you to fish. I would love to give you all the fish in the world, but I'm not going to be here. So while you're starving,
Mhm.
I'm at another school because they're starving, right? So my focus is building capacity with you guys. So it's a mind shift.
And as soon as you start building that capacity, and as soon as teachers and administrators start living the philosophy as well, it's less overwhelming for
Right.
everyone.
Oh, that's it, man. I mean, we have a lot of behavior analysts are coming into the field and in education are leaving because it is so overwhelming. But we have to reteach. I know, like when I do a lot of consulting around at from school level, district level to state level as well. And once I have a whole thing where about the conditions for change. And the first thing is we're very very transparent when I go out with Anika, it's my colleague, and say like, we want to talk to everybody, right? Don't just hire us to come out there and make a change because if the stakeholders don't see what's in it for them, you're already behind the eight ball because you're forcing them to do stuff. They need to see the vision. They need to understand how this is going to help them get in touch with their values, right? So that's a fundamentally initial part because a lot of behavior analysts are being forced to go in there and do this and go to the next place. They're discounting like the teacher, right? The teacher needs to be involved. There's got to be want. They need to see and we don't have time to build relationships. And like the fact is, we don't have time not to, because the relationship is an accomplishment. If you don't have a relationship with somebody, right? If they don't trust you, if they don't feel like you're there to help them or whatever, they're going to again do just enough to get by and they're not going to want you back there. But because everybody's so eager to make behavior change right now, right? They're like, just go do the stuff. We end up checking boxes and we don't get the outcomes that we want, right? So you can't cheat the process. So some people are better at building relationships than others. Some people are better than, creating want from others. And those are things that can be studied, right? Like motivational interviewing. But if they're like I was, and many people were, they go in, they're assigned to a classroom, they show up at the classroom, they sit at the back, they collect data. Think about that, how ridiculous that is. Like, can you imagine somebody coming into your workplace and just sitting in the back, not introducing himself, and just collecting data on your performance? I mean, it's so stupid that I did that. And I'm not calling anybody out there stupid that has done it as well. But if you think about it, it's just not smart, right? It's like somebody coming into your house and like that's their home,
Yeah.
and in the whole process, you shouldn't show up to begin with. And my belief is that if the school leader needs you in there, right? That discussion should probably have there and have the teacher reach out to you, say, hey, can you support me? And they create that want there. That would be ideal. So now they're inviting you into their home because that's been set up. Because if they don't want you in there, again, I don't think we should be in there. That needs to happen at the school level. We are not those people to do that. I think I'm not saying never. Sometimes we are, but for the most part, if we're getting called out to support a classroom, that work should happen at the school front. And even if the school leader invited you in with the CC to the teacher and said, hey, I spoke with the teacher, and we both agreed that there'd be some great support. So now there's different people involved, and now we're also paired with that. So simple stuff like that, but important.
I can't imagine, flipping roles, right? And if I were a teacher, I'm not, but if I were a teacher in a classroom, whether I was a teacher in a classroom for 1 year or for 30 years, having someone come in as a BCBA with letters behind their name who I've never met before and maybe introduced themselves, maybe didn't, and basically just sat there with a clipboard and a pen the whole time. Like, how awful would that be? And then shows up at a meeting with 4 other people at the meeting and tells me how to do my job. Like, what a great analogy in terms of that it's the home of a teacher. You can't just go in and mess it up.
I mean, it happened to me recently where I was called in by the school to come and consult for a specific child, and the school wanted the teachers to talk to me before I went. And I was like, first a little annoyed. I'm like, I don't need to talk to the teachers. Like, just let me go in and like, I want to see the kid. And I agreed to the phone call, and the teachers got on the phone, and they really just wanted to be validated and
Mhm.
heard. They wanted to tell me everything that's going on and why it's so hard for them. And I heard them out. And when I came into the classroom, like we were in such a better place.
Yep.
And I had to remind myself, and I think what you're saying now is so important, that like it's not just about go to see the kid and fix the problem. It really is about building that relationship, because that they're the ones who are going to matter on whether this problem is going to be fixed. And so that was a really good reminder.
They are, man. They're everything. If you want that stuff to continue, man, that has to be part. But we're forgetting about the people that are involved in this stuff. We're forgetting about like the environment. We're focusing directly on the kids, and it's the environment that needs to be changed, which means that adult in that classroom or adults in that classroom are going to need to do something more or less or differently, regardless. It doesn't mean they're doing anything wrong right now. Doesn't, every child comes in with their own history, with their own DNA, but we can't change their DNA. We can't change their learning history. What we can do is change the environment in a way that gets the best out of them. And those adults are the most important people in that environment. The same way the school leaders and anybody that supports the teachers are the most important people in their environment, right? It's all connected. It's all chained.
And one of the things you talked about in your talk was also about getting performance reviews. Like we so often do fidelity checks and we go in and we make sure that the staff are doing what they're supposed to be doing. But you talked about it going both ways. Like the staff have to also be doing a performance review almost on us. How do you get accuracy, or how do you even get honesty? Is it part of the relationship, or how does that?
Sure, you buy the teachers a coffee first and then give them the test.
Well, one of the things are like, look, you have to. I have like a 5-step process that we outline in a couple of my books. It's pinpointing, goal setting, self-monitoring, report out, which is number 3, reciprocal feedback, and positive reinforcement, right? And so when we pinpoint, this is part of the assessment, finding out, getting to the root of things, finding out what's going on, right? Finding out what results we want to be produced. This is part of that, using the ACT matrix, right? Using grow questions, using motivation interviewing, all the things that we talk about in my first course there. By that time, if you've done it right, you've created a want for that teacher, that educator, whoever you're supporting, that parent, to want to make a change. But you have to have that want, and you use their responses to you as feedback, as data. Like they can be ambivalent or resistant, right? Then that's in the talk, or they engage in change talk, like, well, maybe I'm able to do this, or I could do this more or less or differently, or whatever. But don't start planning unless you can see that they're on board for it, right? And part of the goal setting is like, have you ever heard of SMART goals? It's a very common thing out there. Well, here's the SMART goal snafu, I think. In the traditional SMART goals, it's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound or something like that. And a lot of that's fine, right? But I would argue that the T should not be time bound, should be trackable. So time bound can be in there, right? And the M should be motivational. That which means that if they're not motivated to achieve this goal, it's not smart at all. So the motivation needs to be started up front by asking those good questions, by finding out what's important to them, by engaging and supporting them with engaging behaviors that are going to help them to produce outcomes that are value to them. So you need those pieces of the puzzle, but then you need to also understand that breaking those goals down into smaller accomplishments, because accomplishments are like salient. They allow you to know you're making progress towards this longer term goal. Because sometimes, like at a school level, if you want to reduce suspensions or something like that, reduce one-on-ones or reduce restraints, that's a data point that you're probably not going to achieve right away, especially if like there's a number of things that need to occur. Like if the root cause of these issues are that there's no systems in place at the school level, no classroom management systems, the teachers haven't been trained, et cetera, all that stuff needs to happen before you're going to start moving that data point. So every time it's the number of teachers that are trained, accomplishment. The number of teachers who now have a classroom management plan, accomplishment, right? Number of teachers standing at the door greeting kids, accomplishment. Number of times teachers been observing, giving feedback, accomplishment, you know? So all these things, when they get chained together, eventually, you know, number of students who can state the expectations, number of teachers who are using 4-to-1s. Once you get all these in place, then you're going to start to see that result moving. But if you're only looking at that result, it's going to look like nothing's happening. Those goals need to be unpacked into accomplishments. It's very powerful. The next part, coming back to your question now, that's the self-monitoring and reporting out, right? So we can't see everybody's behavior, but if you've involved them in the goal setting, they want to make this change, they're going to be willing to take a look at what they're doing and the outcomes they're producing, right? So you make it easy for them. Text, Google form, like a document, whatever they want. You ask them what's going to be best for them. We explain to them like, hey, all this stuff takes habits, right? And if I just give you the stuff and walk away, it's not going to help you get in the habit. And if you get in this habit, it's going to help you improve behavior, help learning, you know, get you in touch with some sort of goals. Would it be okay if you did this? And then, of course, you know, how often would you be willing to do it? But the next part is the reciprocal feedback, right? So this is where we do a little inter-observer agreement. When they report out to us during the week, we can, if we're not there, we can ask really good questions, ask for precision, so we can assess what they're doing. We can positively reinforce what they're doing well, ask some other questions. Maybe there's some details that they left out to make sure that we are keeping them, you know, again, behaving well enough and long enough that they're going to produce a valued outcome. And if a lot of people are, it's say do is important to them. If they know we're going to come look, if they know we're asking questions, if they're self-monitoring, reporting out, it increases the likelihood that they're going to do the things that they're saying, right? Now, when we come, we are just doing inter-observer agreement. And we're saying, yes, you're doing this, that, and the other, ask some questions about some other things. And now we start to accelerate performance. But that feedback is reciprocal in nature because it's two pieces, right? Us giving them feedback, us looking at their performance as feedback for us. In other words, if they're not performing to standard, what do we need to do more or less or differently that's going to move them? But also checking in with them to say, how am I doing for you as your coach? Is there anything I can do more or less or differently to be more supportive? You know, I'm here for 1 day a week. I'm with you for an hour, you know, I'll do whatever I can to be better for you. I am a servant to you, you know? And then of course, the last essential or the last law we call it is positive reinforcement. We got to be making sure that we're getting people in touch with positive reinforcement. But if we've done good pinpointing, we've done good goal setting, we found out in the pinpointing, we use the ACT matrix, which again, I love to use. We find out what people's values are. We should be getting them moving towards some valued outcomes, right? Hopefully they're producing some sort of positive reinforcement. So that boils it down to like my simplified approach to, and I believe we have to keep things simplified because complexity is an enemy of execution, sustainability, and scalability. We got to make things simple for people. And as I said, I believe that we can solve 80% of the problems with 20% of the science. Keep it simple as possible, as much as possible.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, just as getting to the end, that there was a few things you wish you knew then that you know now. If you could pick one thing to advise, a newly minted BCBA, what's one thing you wish you knew then?
Oh, right from the bat, that student behavior is the result, and we need to change adult behaviors, right? So I wish I would have recognized that right from the beginning and started involving the stakeholders right off the bat. Right, the first day, what I learned after 4 years of going to schools, I started my first day with the school leader to explain how I could best support them with capacity. It wasn't even part of the district expectations because they didn't know better, right? I had to redesign. I had to set the expectation. And I explained why. You know, like, hey, if you want this, then okay, I can do these plans, but you're not going to see me, and there's not going to be a change. I want you would be best used to get me to support you with building capacity, but it also set the expectation. Like when they got other things popping off, I already said it up front. You're not going to see me. You know, I can't be in 10 places at once. You know, so let me support the people in your school who are doing it. And you know, 5 out of 6 principals were great with it up front because they understood. They didn't know better. And there's always the one that you get the call, and okay, I'll come out and do that. And their consequences, like long term, they learn after a while, like, you know, I told you. I mean, I told you from the beginning, you know, I document the notes, I document the conversation, I send them a recap on it. So there's no question about what was said and that what we agreed to. And you know, it's like it's just teaching them better how they could best utilize me because I want to be of service. I want to help them produce valued outcomes, you know. And if the expectation is that I'm going to change all the behavior, there's no way I can do that. There's no way I can be successful.
So, Paulie, you now have the title of your next book. What I knew then, or what I know now that I wish I knew then.
Oh, maybe that's a
You
good
go.
one.
Write it down.
Yeah, I should. That's a good, not a short one. I need to start doing shorter books. So, not that my
Long
books are too
title,
long,
short
but
book.
shorter be bag. Yeah.
Paulie, thank you. For those of you who want more, check out his books. This is an older book of his, Quick Wins, which is really awesome as well, talking about how you can get some really quick wins, breaking down those goals in a school and getting teacher buy-in right away. But there's lots of books, so check those out.
What's your newer book called?
Positional, and that book's not that old. That book just came out last year in 2023. My latest book, and I have 2 versions of it, because I had to put it like a rated G version, so I'll give you the rated R version first. It's called Positional Authority Ain't Leadership, Behavior Science for Navigating Bullshit, Avoiding, Optimizing Performance, and Avoiding Ass Clownery. So I had to take out all the asses and shit for the second version, which is the clean version, and I just call it Class Clownery, and there's no asses or shit in there. So I figured, you know, because some people are sensitive to that stuff. Yeah, so some people are excited. I call it the educational version, so you know, more people would be ready to approach it. But all the books have something special in it, you know. So
Right.
I think, you know, they're good for everybody.
So we'll put a link to your books into our podcast as well. So check that out for those people listening. Go check that out. Also, I'm looking forward to the ABA Toolbox. Oh, I said it wrong. Cut that out.
The behavioral toolbox.
Thank you. So it's the Behavioral Toolbox.
Yeah.
My girlfriend Layla runs ABA Toolbox. That's why I get that wrong. Also, I'm looking forward to the Behavioral Toolbox and checking out your CEUs on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's solid. I just dropped my link in there, by the way, so you can that's got all it's got all the books, got the behavioral toolbox on it, all that stuff. But it's solid. You know, a lot of times people are just putting up PowerPoints or talking about it on the PowerPoints. We had this professionally produced, through ABA Technology. It's been great. Like we invested a lot of money in doing this stuff, a lot of time. You know, Anika Costa is an instructional designer. She's working on her, you know, finishing up her doctorate there. So we're very fortunate. Matt Sikoria, you know, he's got a big mouthpiece, you know, in terms of, you know, his podcast. So we're able to put the word out. We're putting out stuff that we really believe in, that we love, you know, and we know that it helps people.
And it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. I'm so glad we met and we're able to continue the conversation, and really just thank you for all that you're doing for the field and to really make change. I think you talk about building capacity in the school, but I think you're building capacity in the field. And so we appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always an honor. I really do appreciate it.